It's recording.
Thank you. So we are live. We'll allow about 15 to 30 seconds for guests to join the meeting virtually. Once that time has passed, we will start off with a brief statement. So again, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alani Kyoki, and I'm the Executive Director of the Hawaii Retirement Savings Program. Welcome to its virtual board meeting and hybrid in-person board meeting. The chairperson of the board will read through a brief statement explaining how participants of this meeting can participate both virtually and via telephone.
Okay, thank you, Alani. To view the meeting and provide live oral testimony, please use the link at the top of the agenda. You will be asked to enter your name. The board requests that you enter your full name, but you may use a pseudonym or other identifier if you wish to remain anonymous. You will also be asked for an email address. You may fill in this field with any entry in an email format. For example, at mail.com. Your microphone will be automatically muted and video will be turned off. When the chairperson asks for public testimony, you may click the raise hand button found on your Zoom screen to indicate that you wish to testify about an agenda item. You will individually be enabled to unmute your microphone, turn on your video if you choose to, and testify. When recognized by the chairperson, please unmute your microphone and turn on your video if you choose to before speaking, and mute your microphone and turn off your video after you finish speaking. For phone access, if you cannot get internet access, you may get audio-only access by calling the Zoom phone number listed at the top on the agenda. Upon dialing the number, you will be prompted to enter the meeting ID, which is also listed at the top of the agenda. After entering the meeting ID, you will be asked to wait to be admitted into the meeting. When the chairperson asks for public testimony, you may indicate you want to testify by entering star and then 9 on your phone's keypad. And after entering star and then 9, a voice prompt will let you know that the host of the meeting has been notified. When recognized by the chairperson, you may unmute yourself by pressing star and then 6 on your phone. A voice prompt will let you know that you are unmuted. And once you are finished speaking, please enter star and then 6 again to mute yourself. For both internet and phone access, when testifying, you will be asked to identify yourself and the organization, if any, that you represent. Each testifier will be limited to 5 minutes of testimony per agenda item. Pursuant to Act 12 SLH 2024, the board may remove or block any person who willfully disrupts or compromises the conduct of the meeting. If connection to the meeting is lost for more than 30 minutes, the meeting will be continued on a specified date and time. This information will be provided on the board's website at https://labor.hawaii.gov/hr/board-meetings/. Instructions to attend State Hawaii virtual board meetings may be found online at labor.hawaii.gov/wp-content/uploads backslash 2050 backslash 01 backslash State of Hawaii Virtual Board Attendee Instructions .pdf. So before we call the meeting to order, let's do a roll call. So I'm representing, Bill Kunzman. He had a family emergency, so I'm attending on his behalf. So I'm Jade Butai, Director of and Co-Chairperson of the board. Then Jesse Kiola Dean,
Present.
Barbara Craig,
Present.
Andrew Nomura,
Here.
Brian Taniguchi,
Here.
and Representative Andrew Garrett.
Excused.
And then members excused, Luis Salaveria, Karen Yasukawa, and Senator Henry Aquino. I apologize. It's been, I've been in a dizzy this morning.
Present.
So, I would like to call the meeting to order now at 1:08 p.m. So now we have to, the first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes for the October 21, 2024 meeting. Do we have any testimony from the public?
Chair, I don't see any hands raised.
Okay, do we have any comments from the board? Any?
No comment.
Okay, if there are no amendments and all members vote to approve the minutes, then a motion to approve the minutes will need to be made.
So moved.
Do I get a second?
Second.
So the motion was made by Ms. Krieg, seconded by Mr. Dean. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, so next item on the agenda is the 2025 legislative session. The first one that we will take up is the SB 855 because there's going to be a hearing scheduled tomorrow. So do we have any testimony from the public?
I don't see any hands raised, but for the public's information, Senate Bill 855 relating to the Hawaii Retirement Savings Act clarifies the definition of covered employer under the Hawaii Retirement Savings Act. It requires the covered employers to automatically enroll covered employees into the Hawaii Retirement Savings Program unless the employee chooses to opt out. It also repeals the limit of the total fees and expenses that can be spent for the program each year. The bill finally appropriates funds to the Department of Labor and Industrial Relations for the development and operation of the program. Senate Bill 855 is the companion to House Bill 847 relating to the Hawaii Retirement Savings Act. Any discussion by the board members? So for the board's information and due to the 24-hour time limit, I did submit testimony on behalf of the board. The testimony generally reflects the same language as provided in the Senate bill that was heard last year. So it is testimony in support. It also provides an explanation as to how the funding will be used, including certain amount for marketing, legal fees, and basically the startup or operations of the program itself. In the testimony, there is also a paragraph related to the board providing any additional comments specifically provided in this meeting. So what the board members should note that there is a separate paragraph or provision that is completely different from the bills heard last year. And it's with regard to the repeal of the limit on the total fees and expenses that can be spent by the program. So what I'd like to get from the board members, if they have any comments with regard to that specific change.
All right, Alani, this is Barbara. Sorry, for some reason, I'm not able to do the raised hand on the Zoom. So I'll just raise my hand when I have a question. So I just wanted to speak out in support of that proposed change as well. We had not as a board discussed that particular change, I don't believe, because it was one we were only recently made aware of. But my understanding is because the original legislation was drafted, who knows, how many years ago, that the cap that is in there is unrealistic. And even below what the largest states with existing programs are paying. So basically it's a non-functional, limit. Also knowing how hard it is to change legislation, once it's passed, I would hate to have a limit in there where we'd have to go back potentially every year, 2 years, even if it's 5 years. Rather than having the language that is proposed, which I think is excellent, which is, having prudent, low as possible fees. So I think as a board, I'm recommending that we approve that proposed change and roll that into, the standing policy direction for the individuals who are authorized to testify on the board's behalf.
Thank you, Barbara. I will provide those comments. Brian has kindly volunteered his services after I asked him to help me testify tomorrow, since this is my first hearing for this particular board. So Brian will be there.
I'll be there. Yeah, I think one thing we should probably discuss is there was a similar administration bill that was introduced. I'm the chair if I was the chair of labor, like Senator Aquino is, I would probably ask the differences between the administration bill and this proposed bill, which the senator introduced. And so I think we need to kind of ensure that we have that kind of clear.
So for the board's information and members of the public, the 2 administration bills, which are also listed on the board's agenda, House Bill 1136 relating to the Hawaii Retirement Savings Act and Senate Bill 1455 relating to the Hawaii Retirement Savings Act, basically mirrors the language of the bills introduced last year, with the exception of the appropriation, as well as the repeal of the current language regarding how much the program can spend. So if the board would like those 2 bills to mirror language closer to SB 855, we can make those suggestions in testimony if the 2 administration bills are heard. But it's really at the board needs to decide that.
Okay.
Ms. Creed?
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea to me. Although I have a related question. My understanding from a discussion, either our previous board meeting or the one before that, is that in addition to the program operational funds and the 25 million that we know was taken back, that there is an appropriation of $1 million for the outreach. And where is that money? What's the status of that money?
The $1 million+ that was included in 2022,
Yes.
those funds have lapsed as well.
Our last report was that they would not lapse.
So I believe the funds lapsed June 30th, 2024.
So we have nothing other than the, about 250,000 currently operating funds?
So what was included in the Department of Labor's operating budget was funding for the positions.
All right.
And then I think
This money that we're requesting now then has to cover outreach, contracts, anything of that nature to actually get the program started. Is that right?
Yes.
there's also a GM being contemplated.
There is a GM being contemplated. I did draft language to be inserted into the GM that is still being considered.
And what would that ask for?
720,000 as indicated, or to mirror Senate Bill 855 and House Bill 847.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Looking at Senate Bill 855 as an example, if you look on page 8, starting in line 12, that section may need some clarification now that where the proposal is to change it from an opt-in to an opt-out. So the first thing is on line 16 on page 8. The word program administrator, or the term program administrator, probably means covered employer. Because I don't think you want the program administrator responsible for providing employees with notice that they can opt out. You want the employers to be responsible. And I think that's the overall though, I think now that it's an opt out, the board might want to consider specifying the date when an employer, a covered employer, has to provide a covered employee with the notice to opt out, both on the initiating of the program and for every new hire after. Because otherwise, right now, there's no deadline, and the board has no authority to set a deadline as to when an employer has to provide an employee with the notice to opt out.
Wouldn't that be part of what we would do in the administrative rulemaking? It seems
Yeah,
like going into the weeds.
right now, I mean, the language is sort of unclear, but it does say, because lines 12 and 13 says beginning on the date to be determined by the board, you could say that applies to the notice. But just for a point of clarification, for more guidance, to provide more guidance to employers and to the board in enforcing the rules, in any rules that they might make. You might want to separate it out and specify when the employer has to provide the notice. And the second thing is, once the employer provides the notice, how long does the employer have to wait until they start withholding contribution money from the employee? So, one issue is that, this is targeting primarily small businesses. And so what we don't want it with the situation, I think the board might want to consider avoiding is having to undo something. So, you hire an employee, you give him a stack of papers, you say, look through it, he goes, fine, puts it down on his kitchen table, never looks at it again, with the full intent that he did not want to participate in this program. And you won't know that his contribution is going to be withheld until they actually start getting withheld. Then he goes back to his employer and says, I never wanted to participate in the first place. Then the question becomes, okay, what does the employer do at that point in time? So you might want to give sort of a consideration period for the employer to have to wait until he starts withholding. And gives the employer some time to remind his employees that if you don't opt out, we're going to start withholding. And really the idea is to just avoid having to undo something that was never intended in the first place.
So I am personally a little uncomfortable with trying to pull dates, deadlines like that out now. The reason being that, to make that sort of decision or guidance that has not appeared in the statute before, I would rely on investigating what other states are doing, because I think there are like 16 or 17 programs now. And hopefully, and I'll speak to this when we start talking about our future meetings, hopefully we as a board would agree to some offered training and education in what other states are doing when it comes into all of these nuts and bolts. Like I said, to me, that is exactly what rulemaking is for, because you then have adequate processes to get input, not only about what the other states are doing, but input by that time from the employers locally, employees locally, anybody who wants to participate in the process of rulemaking. That's my take on it.
Right, so if you look on page 8 of SB 855, lines 12 and 13, that can remain. So, it's a date to be determined by the board, and then you could do it through administrative rules. I guess the consideration that I'm suggesting is that from 14, lines 14 down, that you kind of clear it up, clean it up a little bit. And so one date to be set by the board is the date by which the employer must provide an employee with the notice to opt out. And then the second thing would be the date by which the employer then starts withholding contributions. But still, lines 12 and 13 would remain, so we're still up to the discretion of the board, and you can make that through administrative rules. But it's just a clarification.
I would agree with Barbara that I think in this case, I think it'd be difficult to put that kind of information in here. And I would prefer to leave it till later on to get more input into what sort of works.
Yeah, okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
It's just
Although the change you're talking about in
Line 16.
line 16 is pretty,
yeah,
that should be changed, right?
right.
So,
Mr. Dean.
Yeah.
Has raised his hand.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I agree with both of my colleagues. I would prefer to rely on the rulemaking process. I think that's more appropriate for establishing, specific dates and more specific processes. But the comment regarding inserting additional language, just giving us the authority, I would also, I can get behind that as well. I could support that. Thank you.
Line 16.
Can this be covered in the governor's message, if there is one? The change to that line 16.
So would you like to? Okay.
Yeah, I think the board, if they want to change it, maybe the board should.
Yeah.
Submit testimony.
So I would recommend that tomorrow we verbally provide that suggested amendment. And then Senator Aquino, I can provide you a written draft as well.
so the suggestion, Michael's at that line 16, instead of the program administrator, it's the employer,
The covered employer.
the covered employer.
Correct.
Yeah, I concur with everybody too on the date, because sometimes you think, you should put the, like, sometimes you think you want to get the bill passed first before you start thinking about,
Yeah,
because you don't know the nuts and bolts, like what Barbara said.
So for purposes, unless there's additional discussion, for purposes of the formal record, can we get a formal vote to support SB 855 with suggested amendments?
suggested amendment is to change line 16 on page 8.
Correct.
From the program administrator to the covered employer.
I saw.
Second,
So for the public's information, again, it's to support 855, and if I can make suggest a friendly amendment. This would be inclusive of 847 and possibly the administrative bills too. to make that friendly amendment, as well as submit additional comments to the Labor Committee tomorrow. Is that correct? Numbers?
Right.
Okay.
So there's one other issue the board might want to consider is whether to provide a provision, a specific provision that allows a covered employee who has been enrolled in the program to withdraw from the program later.
I'm not sure how I stand on that in terms of what's in the rest of the bill. And I get concerned that if we approach too many issues and too many changes, this just becomes more complicated and less likely to get the really critical changes through. You know, and again, I'm hopeful that within the next month or two, we as a board will have much more information about down to the details how these programs are working best in other states. So I assume you're talking about they're in the state program and then decide to do their own 401k or that sort of program. Is that correct?
Right, you know, whatever, for whatever reason, a covered employee, you know, once he's enrolled, may no longer want to participate in the program. So just to provide a clear procedure for, if the board wants to allow that, to allow for a clear procedure on how that could be handled.
Yeah, I would hesitate to get into that in the current legislation because I think that's a little, I mean, I'm assuming that as long as an employer has a program that's offered, you know, that the employees can pay into, it doesn't matter whether it's a state program or a private program. The whole point is that every employee should have the ability to be in a payroll-based retirement savings program. You know, and if that's the case, I'm not sure that we need to get into in this legislation expressly authorizing that.
Probably nine just mentions that an employee who has not opted out. So that might be sufficient. And, you know, it kind of mentions opting out. But
Right, I mean, I mean, that could cover it. I guess we're thinking about a situation where the employee is actually enrolled in the program, you know, and then he wants to opt out afterwards, yeah.
I mean, it seems to me these are all the kind of contingencies that you would cover in the rulemaking rather than in legislation such as this. I don't know what's in the rest of the bill, so.
For what it's worth, my current understanding of how these programs operate is an employee can opt out at any time. It's not a, you know, if you don't opt out in the first 30 days, you're stuck in the program forever. My understanding is at any time with whatever notice we would put in rulemaking, the employee notifies the employer and then the employee is out. So if that's the concern, again, that I think is a default of how these programs operate. Not needing express authorization for that, but I think I'm getting a little confused maybe on what you're trying to get at, Michael.
No, that's the issue that I want to raise.
Mm.
So yeah, it's you know, just something we want to raise. It's another sort of point of clarification, whether you want to specifically provide for that situation or not.
Yeah, I think that's rulemaking on is more about this is how you can disenroll at any time.
Yeah,
you have to do something like that. It has to be because it's payroll, you have to do it before the next pay, you know, effective the end of the next payroll or something.
right. I mean, yeah,
But you have to have that kind of language.
there's a mechanism and then there's a timing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's something that you want to specify.
Other comments? So I guess just for my clarification, under 389-4, because we are discussing administrative rules, is number 7, develop and implement an investment policy and other policies sufficient enough to allow the board to draft rules? Because usually in other chapters, and I can only use my past experience, boards specifically have the authority to draft administrative rules. This is kind of general.
Yeah, so I guess when you think about in the context of who's gonna object if the board relies on administrative rules, who's gonna object to the board providing an opt-out provision once the employee is enrolled, I don't think realistically or practically you're gonna get any objection. And you probably have enough, like Senator Tani just put on the top of the morning, and what Alani just pointed out, you probably have enough room there to justify the authority to make admin rules to govern opting out after the employee is enrolled.
Any other comments?
Do we need to vote on that? No. To support, Senate Bill 855 with the amendments as suggested.
Yeah. So I thought a motion was made earlier. With additional friendly amendments. Okay. So motion was made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Barbara, you're okay?
Sorry, I didn't speak loud enough.
I'll be abstaining for obvious reasons. But thank you, everyone. I do need to excuse myself for a hearing vote, so I'll see you guys tomorrow, hopefully.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right.
Okay. So just to clarify though, because he abstained, but he is a non-voting member, do we still have to do a roll call? If it's unanimous, then no roll call is required. If it's not a unanimous vote, a roll call is required of all board members. But he's a non-voting
Oh,
member,
he's a non-voting member.
so
So it doesn't
we're good.
matter.
Okay.
Okay, so do we move on to the next legislation,
Yes.
which is HB 1136, relating to Hawaii Retirement Savings Act. This bill clarifies the definition of covered employee under the Hawaii Retirement Savings Act. Requires covered employers to automatically enroll covered employees into the Hawaii Retirement Savings Program unless the covered employee chooses to opt out. This is effective upon approval.
And the companion to that bill is Senate Bill 1455 relating to the Hawaii Retirement Savings Act as well. So based on the board members' earlier comments, we'll try and, if any of these bills are heard, we'll try and align the language so that they're request an appropriation, request repeal of the specific language, and add in the additional clarifying language as discussed for Senate Bill 855. Is the board okay with that?
Yes.
Aye.
It might be cleaner if you vote on each, you can just group all the three bills together.
Okay. So we can do that. Then based on these comments, would a board member like to make a motion? Thank you. Seconded?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Sir, do we have any information about whether any bill other than SB 855 is likely to be heard?
I don't have,
What's the deadline for the, for
Bill
that?
so the deadline for bill introduction was last week, Friday. There is an additional bill that I will be adding to the February board meeting, but given the timing of me filing the agenda, it wasn't added in the introduction. So it's not on the agenda. It'll be placed on the February agenda for board discussion. Yep. Anything else?
So do we go to the next one?
Yes.
It's a companion, so we're still gonna go.
So I think we group them together.
So we go to the next item. Or B.
Okay. So now, we'll consider appointing a legislative liaison to assist in providing position and testifying on legislative proposals. And we designated Bill to be the Taniguchi to be the the one testifying for these measures.
So in a past meeting, the board had delegated to Senator Taniguchi, Mr. Taniguchi, and Bill Kunzman, the deputy director, as well as the executive director, once I was hired, the ability to testify and provide information to the legislature on any of the legislative proposals. So would you like to keep the same legislative liaison? No.
As long as they're willing, although I would add, if Bill for some reason is unable to testify, would you accept authorization to, testify in his place on behalf of the board?
Sure, absolutely.
I don't know if we need to specify that. Thank you.
Since we are adding the director, yes, can a motion be made to add the director to
So
the
moved.
board's legislative?
Second.
Okay, thank you. So my report, I provided,
We vote.
yes, I'm sorry, I apologize. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
He wasn't sure.
Sorry, I have a question, a follow-up question, Michael. If for some reason any of us on the board wanted to testify in our individual capacities on any of these bills, making clear that it was as an individual, not on behalf of the board, is that permitted? I don't have any current, desire to do so, but somebody posed the question to me and I think it's a good one to get clarification on.
Without doing any more research, my guess that would be difficult to do because you somehow have to separate yourself and all the information you gathered as a board member and say, all of a sudden, I know nothing about this. I only know what the public knows, and I'm testifying as a member of the public. So I think, practically speaking, it would be difficult to do.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we've run into that situation past where, some of the board members didn't even say that they were testifying on behalf of, as an individual. So it kind of, they were. So I think, I don't think you can, really remove yourself as a, just, I'm not, like if I, the moment I go and testify about something, I don't think people can say, you're testifying not as the director of labor.
Good point.
Are there other boards that have the whole board authorized to speak on behalf of the?
So under Chapter 92, you can designate up to 2 members of the board to discuss, the board decides the legislative policy and you authorize up to 2 members to take that policy and discuss it with the legislature.
I see.
So one thing in authorizing the director, I think it should be made clear that the director as a non-member of the board, right? So right now, the 2 board members are the co-chair and Senator Taniguchi. And then Alani, as a staff member, is being delegated that authority. And then I think the director, it should be made clear that he's not being authorized as a board member. but as the DLR director. Yeah, just so it's clear, you're not exceeding the 2 board member limit.
Right. Yeah, because I think it's important that the legislature knows that DLIR approves of whatever the, it is that we propose as the board.
So for my report, I just provided the board meeting schedule for 2025. The board meetings will typically be held on a Tuesday at 1 p.m. They will be hybrid board meetings. So all of the dates have since been posted to the program's website. We will include on the program's website the Zoom links to participate virtually as well as the in-person location. So I have tentatively scheduled for everyone today's board meeting, February 18th, March 18th, April 15th, June 17th, August 19th, October 21st. So you'll note that during the legislative session, we meet monthly. Thereafter, it's every other month, and then no meeting in December, given travel and holidays.
So Alani and or Michael, what is the protocol if any of the board members has a particular discussion that we want to have with, on a particular issue? Do we just email you, Alani, and say, can you add this to the agenda, or does it need to be something broader than that?
So email me to have something added to the agenda, and then I'll discuss it with the chair or co-chairs. Okay.
And along those lines, something that I am interested in doing, assuming other board members are interested, through AARP, who obviously have been very helpful through this whole process, Pew Research is willing to come back to Hawaii. They had given us, they've been very involved in the task force that preceded the passing of this legislation, and they've done education on a lot of this. They've offered to do, to whatever extent we're interested, education to the board, and I'll call it a board training, which really I think would be most helpful if it were the sharing of what other states have done, what has been most effective in those states, so that we really get a better feel for how, as I said, the nuts and bolts of how these programs work, and so that we don't make the same mistakes. And I personally also would appreciate some either guidance, reminder, whatever you call it, in what our oversight is versus what we, keep hands off and have, executive director responsibility, just making sure we all have a feel for oversight versus actual supervision, if you will.
So I'm to advise the board. I was just going to say that I think generally educational seminars, training, that's sufficient. However, if it's 2 or more members, we do have to have a notice meeting. So if Q comes down in person to train the board members, we will have to file it as a notice meeting.
Right, that was what I assumed. And I guess then the question would be whether that should take place if it works out on one of the scheduled board dates, meeting dates, because I also, I know different board members have lots of different obligations. I don't know that it's realistic at this point to expect an additional meeting. We already have a good, healthy schedule of meetings.
So I can reach out to Pew, see when they're available, and provide them the board meeting dates as well. I would recommend that we not have the training session during the legislative session, given that we have to go through bills, get positions, so forth, that it be sometime either in the summer or the last meeting in October.
Okay. If as long as other board members are okay with this, I don't want to be forcing this on anybody.
It's good. Yeah. I'm sorry, what is do you have a time? 1 p.m.
1 p.m.
Okay.
Okay. Any other comments, questions?
Jesse.
I just wanted to add, I agree with everything that was said, but I also wanted to add that it's been some time since we've had an update on the, state of the art of this program in other states. And so I think that training and update is necessary with, what is happening in the other states to date.
Yeah, especially to the extent that, as I understand it, several of the small states have now banded together on these compacts. And that there's more than one option now, but it looks like that's a model that is likely to work, and that can be really good for us.
Yep.
So do you think that update could possibly be during the June meeting? And again, during January through April, it's the legislative session.
So is the update gonna be provided by Pew, and then they can kind of talk about what they're seeing from other states, what they're doing, and is that?
Yes, yeah, because they've been instrumental in really supporting these programs in many states. And then they even have people there who have been on staff on other states and putting these programs together. Jade, I've become aware of this only because I'm also on the executive council of AARP. And so through that, I've seen what AARP is doing to support the program. And that was how I was brought into the loop on this. And when it was proposed, I was very enthusiastic and appreciative, thinking it would help us as a board tremendously.
No, I think I can see the benefits. I mean, because if we make any mistake, I mean, I hope it's be original rather than repeating what other states already made. So that we're not.
Exactly. But I mean, and that's the advantage in, it's taken us too long to get Alani on board, but now that she's here, we can avoid, we have another, year and a half of others' mistakes that we can learn from. And that'll help us.
Yeah, I think the sooner that happens, the better. I mean, so as soon as your schedule opens up, then I think you should try and schedule something like that.
Okay.
I think thinking beyond, and hopefully we get by this legislative session successfully. I think the board needs to our organization needs to put together a strategic plan on where we're going 3 years from now. What does the program look like? And I think having that background information from Pew would be very helpful in sort of helping us go down certain paths. But I think we need to put some sort of strategic plan together.
So Alani, how would it be if I were to reach out to the Pew contact and give them the dates of our meetings and say, as of now, which of these dates, if any, would work for you, Pew? Because it would be probably a couple of hours by the time we go through, all of what Pew has. And then I can bring that information back at the next board meeting and we can see where we want to go from there. Does that work?
That works, or I can do it as well. I've been in contact with Pew directly.
Okay. Then if you want to reach out to them, that would be great.
Sure, I can do that.
And I have to say, I'm just so pleased to see that we have now regularly scheduled board meetings, and thank you for doing that. We're finally moving ahead.
My pleasure. Thank you for hiring me. Okay. I think with that, the next board meeting is scheduled for February 18th at 1 p.m. in this conference room and virtually. If things change, I'll let you know. I will provide the meeting packets virtually as well, unless someone reaches out directly and requests a hard copy packet. Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, for a motion to adjourn.
No motion is required, but you may adjourn
Oh,
the
okay.
meeting.
Okay, let's adjourn.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Good to
Thank
see
you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Aloha.
And today was I feel like I'm having deja vu. It's like March 2020 because we got that